Hello and welcome to Passing Priority. My name is Mike and today I cordially invite you to join me at the biggest wedding in Innistrad. Today we will join the bride, Olivia, Crimson Bride. She is a 6 mana legendary vampire noble costing 4, a black and a red. She will be quick down the aisle, coming with both flying and haste, and whenever Olivia attacks we can return a target creature from our graveyard tapped and attacking. But that creature will gain the line of text. When we don't control a legendary vampire, we exile that creature. Olivia's on attack trigger reminds me of two other powerful commanders, Kalia the Vast and Alesha who smiles at death. Both these legends add white into their commander's colour identity, but both come with drawbacks. Kalia can only cheat into play from our hand, angels, demons and dragons. And Alesha does reanimate from our graveyard, but we can only get creatures with power 2 or less. Olivia has no restrictions on what she can bring back, meaning we can cheat into play any creature that fits our commander's colours. So for this deck, we are trying to cheat in as many powerful creatures as we can. We want to get as much value as we can, as fast as we can, with the creatures we cheat in. So this deck is full of enter the battlefield triggers and combat triggers, with most attached to big scary creatures that will reduce our opponent's life total to 0 fast. We are also running more creatures that can recur our big threats, as we don't just want to rely on our commander. In total, we have 28 enter the battlefield or combat triggers, 7 reanimators and 9 sack outlets to join the usual suspects of ramp, card draw and removal. Let's look at our ramp first. In Rakdos we are focused on artifact ramp, so taking our ramp slots are Sol Ring and Wayfarer's Bauble are our best turn 1 plays, followed by the 2 mana rocks of Arcane Signet, Rakdos Signet, Talisman of Indulgence, Charcoal Diamond, Fire Diamond, Mind Stone, Star Compass and Felwar Stone. Our only non-rock ramp piece is Solemn Simulacrum, who on entering the battlefield will fetch us a basic land from our deck to the battlefield, and on death draws us a card. Unlike our other mana ramp, we can recur this with our commander if needed, but we ideally have better targets in this deck. But in order to get some of those better creatures, we will need to draw some cards. Because our commander wants to reanimate creatures from our graveyard, discarding cards or sacrificing creatures we already have on the battlefield can be an upside to us rather than a cost. Faithless Looting and Thrill of Possibilities will both have us draw new cards and discard cards. These cards dig us further into our deck, but don't necessarily take us up on the number of cards we have in our hand. But if we can discard our big creature cards we want to reanimate with Olivia, this is better than having them in our hand. Similarly, Altar's Reap and Village Rites will have us sacrifice a creature to draw 2 cards. If we've already gotten our value out of our creature, this is a great way to put it back in our graveyard for our commander to reanimate again. The drawing cards for these cards can almost be seen as extra value. Dark Deal will have all players discard their hand, and draw cards equal to the amount they discarded -1. With some of the other reanimation spells we will look at later, we don't always have to bring back our own creature. We can steal threats from our opponents, so forcing them to put a few options in their graveyard is never bad. Plus the interruption this can cause should never be overlooked. We have some creatures that provide us some card advantage when they enter the battlefield or deal combat damage. On entering the battlefield, Combustible Gear Hulk will give target opponent a choice. They can either have us draw 3 cards or mill 3 cards, and they take damage equal to the mana value of the cards we mill. Due to the big creatures we want to reanimate, the average mana value of this deck is quite high, so the second option should deal a lot of damage, so they should choose to let us draw the cards instead most times. Dragon Mage, on dealing combat damage to an opponent, will have each player discard their hand and draw 7. Being a flying creature, we hopefully should have an opponent we can connect with to get this trigger to resolve. We can also wheel each player's hands away with Ruin Grinder, but this triggers on its death rather than on dealing combat damage. Ruin Grinder also has Mountain Cycling, so we can very easily put it in our graveyard to be reanimated, without the need of any other cards. Lord of the Void will trigger on dealing combat damage to an opponent. When it does, we exile the top 7 cards of their library, and we can put a creature from among those cards into play under our control. This will allow us to get access to creatures and effects that we would not normally get access to in Rakdos. Plus this will also leave the remaining cards in exile, meaning that we could get rid of cards that could be problematic for us to deal with. Runescar Demon will tutor a card to a hand whenever it enters the battlefield. Gravebreaker Lamia does the same, but the card will go to our graveyard, and Burning Rune Demon tutors for 2 cards, letting our opponents choose which goes to our hand and which goes to our graveyard. These tutors can help us get whatever we need at any point in the game. One of the biggest things our creatures do is help clear the board to get more damage through to our opponents, so a lot of our removal is attached to our large creatures. On entering the battlefield, Noxious Gearhulk will destroy a target creature, and we gain life equal to that creature's power. Dark Hatchling will destroy a non-black creature, and Gormand will have an opponent sacrifice a creature. The Garden Hellkite deals 5 damage divided among any number of targets, and Thunder Dragon deals 3 damage to each non-flying creature. Meteor Golem will destroy any non-land permanent an opponent controls, while Tyrant of Discord will have a target opponent sacrifice a permanent at random, and if that permanent is a non-land card, we get to repeat the process. Archon of Cruelties will trigger on both entering the battlefield and attacking. When it triggers, target opponent will need to sacrifice a creature or planeswalker, discard a card and lose 3 life, all while we gain 3 life and draw a card. Just remember that the on attack trigger won't happen if we cheat it out with our commander, as we will have passed the declare attacker step. When we hit an opponent, Demon of Loathing and Demon of Wailing Agony will both have the defending player sacrifice one of their creatures. Greater Harvester will make that player sacrifice 2 permanents on dealing combat damage. It also has a trigger on our upkeep to sacrifice a permanent we control. This is a great way to get rid of one of our enter the battlefield creatures and reanimate it again to keep getting its effect. Balefire Dragon on dealing combat damage to a player will deal that much damage to each creature that player controls. This can wipe away a large token army and clear the way for some of our powerful creatures that can't get through for damage next turn. Bladegriff Prototype is a great piece of political removal. We will need to swing it at a player who doesn't control what we want to remove. Then on dealing combat damage, the defending player can choose a non-land permanent we don't control and destroy it. This can be a great card for getting in damage and removing things we want to remove, as long as we can convince another player that what we want removed is something they also want gone. Our last creature we use for removal is Rakdos the Defiler. We never want to attack with Rakdos, because if we do, we need to sacrifice half our non-demon permanents. This counts our lands and mana rocks, which with this deck's high mana value cost, we need to hold on to. But if we cheat this out with our commander, we will skip that trigger. But on dealing combat damage to an opponent, they will need to sacrifice half their non-demon permanents. This can very quickly set back a scary player, as in most cases they will choose to keep their lands over anything more impactful on the board. To round out our removal, we are also playing Blasphemous Act as our creature board sweeper and a Chaos Warp to deal with any permanent we want. With a lot of our strongest creatures handling things like card draw and removal, we do have some creatures that have a big impact on the game in other ways. Kardor Doom Scourge on entering the battlefield will force each opponent on their next turn to attack with all their creatures, and swing at a player other than us if possible. This ability means that when we get round the table and back to us, most of our opponents will have either no creatures or only a few that can block us. If we can sacrifice Kardor and keep reanimating it each turn, we can permanently force our opponents to keep attacking each other. Kardor also makes it so that whenever an attacking creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain a life. With the force combat this card can create, plus the amount of attacking we already want to do, this can put a lot of pressure on our opponent's life totals. Another way we can keep pressuring our opponents is with Flayer of the Hatebound. This card has it so that whenever it or another creature enters the battlefield from our graveyard, that creature deals damage equal to its power to any target. If we can keep reanimating our big threats, this can either ping away at our opponent's blockers or deal damage directly to a player. Torgar, Famine Incarnate, is an 8 mana creature, but can be made 2 mana cheaper to cast for each creature we sacrifice while casting it. This can be a surprise sacrifice outlet if we need it, and on entering the battlefield can set a player's life total to half their starting life total, being 20. This can be a great answer to any life gain decks getting out of control, but if we reanimate this with Olivia, then when it enters it sets a player's life total to 20, then this and Olivia can deal 10 points of damage, very quickly dropping a player's life. But one of the best cards to cheat out with our commander is Master of Cruelties. This card sees play in both the Kalia and Lesher decks I mentioned at the start of the video, and it's easy to see why. Master of Cruelties can only attack alone, but if brought out with our commander tapped and attacking, we have bypassed this restriction. Then if it isn't blocked, we set the defending player's life total to 1, and Master of Cruelties assigns no combat damage. That would be scary enough, But this trigger happens before our commander assigns combat damage, dealing 3 points of damage and killing that player. Sacrifice this card to get it back in our graveyard, and do it all over again next turn to kill another player. Our last card to mention for this section is a way we can get infinite combat steps. Port Raiser, our commander, and any sack outlet can create a loop of infinite combat steps that we can use to win the game. The combo works by having Port Raiser first deal combat damage to a player. This will grant us an extra combat step. Port Raiser can't attack a player it has already attacked that turn. If we sacrifice it to a sack outlet, and when Olivia attacks, we reanimate it, attacking a player, the player treats this as a new copy of Port Raiser, and doesn't remember it has already attacked that player. This will allow us to keep attacking the same player with Port Raiser and keep taking extra combat steps. As long as we can keep getting Port Raiser in to deal combat damage to a player, we can win the game. If an opponent does have blockers, we can use Olivia or any other creature we have to attack that player and keep sending Port Raiser to any player we can to get through for damage. We have mentioned sacrificing our creatures to keep bringing them back and keep getting value from them, so we have a good number of sacrifice outlets in this deck to try and ensure we always have access to one of them. Goblin Bombardment can sacrifice a creature to do 1 point of damage to any target, and Falconwrath Aristocrat is a vampire that gains indestructible whenever we sacrifice a creature. Dark Privilege we want to enchant our commander with. Then when we sacrifice a creature to it, we get to regenerate our commander. We don't need to wait for her to be removed, as this creates a regeneration shield that protects her once for the turn. Fallen Ideals is another aura for our commander that will pump our commander. Great if this is a sack outlet during our Port Raiser combo, as we can get Olivia up to a lethal 21 point commander kill if needed. But if Olivia is killed and the aura goes to our graveyard, the ability will return it to our hand to recast and reuse again. Sadistic Hypnotist is not our ideal sack outlet, as we can't use it in response to someone trying to remove our commander. And if we remember, any creature we reanimate with her will be exiled if we don't control a legendary vampire. But each time we sacrifice a creature, we can have target player discard 2 cards. Good against an opponent, but we can always use this on ourselves to put a creature we want to reanimate into our graveyard to be targeted later. But one of the best sack outlets we have is Yahini, Undying Partisan. Whenever we sacrifice a creature to this, Yahini gains indestructible. This is not only great as we get to keep it on the board after a board wipe, but Yahini is also a legendary vampire, meaning that if we have this out and Olivia is removed, we don't need to exile any of the creatures we reanimated with her. Anawan, the Rune Sage, is another legendary vampire that doesn't have an on-demand sacrifice ability, but will have each player sacrifice a non-vampire creature on our upkeep. This helps thin the board of blockers our opponents may have, but also returns anything we get back with Olivia into our graveyard to be reanimated again. Our last sacrifice outlet is Altar of Dementia. When we sacrifice a creature, this card will mill a player a number of cards equal to that creature's power. A great way to get more creatures into our graveyard to be used with our Reanimators. And while we've talked about reanimating with Olivia, we have other ways to keep getting our creatures back. Drana, the Last Blood Chief, feels very similar to Olivia. Whenever she attacks, we will reanimate a non-legendary creature from our graveyard. Unfortunately, the defending player will choose which creature we get back, but with our graveyard full of large creatures, we will hopefully leave them with no great option for them. Chainer, Nightmare Adept, can pull double duty. Chainer has us discard a card to allow us to cast a creature spell from our graveyard each turn. We can only do this once each turn, but this allows us to put a creature we want into our graveyard and recast a creature if we want. Unlike our other Reanimators, we will need to pay the mana and cast the spell, but we can use this to get some of our low mana value creatures back and use our other effects on our higher costed cards. Felden of the Third Path does not reanimate creatures for us. What he does instead is for 3 mana creates a token copy of a creature in our graveyard. This can be good as it leaves the original in there to be brought back by another effect, so we can get a double trigger that turn if we want. But we don't always want our own creatures. We may want to reanimate some of our opponent's threats. On entering the battlefield, Sepulchral Primordial will get a creature from each of our opponents, and on dealing combat damage, Inkai, Servant of Oni, and Scion of Darkness will take a creature from the defending player's graveyard and put it on the battlefield under our control. And lastly, we also have Living Death, having each player swap the creatures in their graveyard with the creatures on the battlefield. With all the triggers this deck has, our last two cards will help make those even better. Panharmonicon will double all the Enter the Battlefield triggers, and Stryneck Resonator can copy any of the attack or damage triggers, including our commanders. Add our mana base, and Olivia is set to walk down the aisle to victory. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider liking this video, as it really does help support the channel. And if you're enjoying the content, then I hope you will click the subscribe button, or share my content with a friend, as this helps the channel keep growing and reach new people. The deck list can be found in the description, and if you want to find a list of all the decks I've built, you can check out my website passingpriority.com, where I have the deck vault, a list of all decks I've covered on the channel. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye for now.